Hi, I'm Melissa with PrepScholar, and I'm here today to share 5 strategies to ace your ACT. The ACT in particular is a really stressful test, not just because it's huge and important, but also because it's actually designed to trick you. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing 5 different ways that you can prepare and make sure that you're not going to be fooled by any of the ACT's little tricks and all of that. If you find this video useful, subscribe to PrepScholar TV, our YouTube channel for all of our different test prep and study skills videos. Also, feel free to take a moment to let us know what your favorite ACT studying strategies are below in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. So, without further ado, here are 5 strategies for passing your ACT. First step, it's gonna sound obvious, but the first one is always practicing. And I know we've all heard the saying a million times, practice makes perfect. But in the case of the ACT, it is absolutely true. So practice tests are going to be one of your biggest assets in acing your ACT. Not just because you've already done a whole bunch of them, but because there's something that you can learn from. And there's actually a whole lot of free practice tests available. You don't have to go into some big program, you don't have to spend a lot of money on prep books. There's actually a lot of free resources out there that can help you get some practice in. I'm going to link a whole bunch of those down in the description, so please do take a moment to flip through them. Obviously, taking ACT practice tests is going to familiarize you with the test itself so that you're going to know what you're looking at when you're doing it. It's also going to give you a good sense of how long it takes you to answer a question. Overall, on the ACT, you only have between 36 seconds to a minute to answer your question, so you're really going to want to make sure that you're using your time wisely. There's something that practice tests do for you that's even more important than gauging your time or getting you familiar with the test, and that is letting you make mistakes that you can learn from. So when you take a practice test, one of the best things that you can do is go through, correct it, find your mistakes, and then not just let those mistakes go and assume that you're going to do better next time, but actually analyze them. Figure out where you're going wrong so you know the areas that you need to study so that you can do better next time. The most important thing is that when you take a bunch of practice tests, you're not just assuming that the act of practicing is what's going to make you better. What's actually going to make you better is the fact that you see your mistakes, you figure out what they are, and you say, I'm not going to do that again. That is what a practice test can do for you. So jumping off of that, the second big thing that you can do to improve your ACT score is to understand the different ways that you can be wrong on a question. Obviously, we tend to think, oh, well, I got the question wrong. I mean, sure, it's not untrue, but the thing that is important to understand is that there are actually multiple ways to get a question wrong. So as you're taking ACT practice tests, you might begin to realize that a lot of the answers sound really similar. And that's not a mistake, and that's not you being like, oh, I just don't understand this. It's actually by design. The ACT uses these really tricky strategies to make it look as though all of the answers are equally viable. In fact, there's always only going to be one correct answer, and the biggest skill you can develop is eliminating the ones that sound like the correct answer but aren't. This is especially true of the ACT reading section, which is where a lot of people get thrown off by answers that sound very similar. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a few of these different ways that you can be wrong and use those to better understand what the ACT is asking for. So the first thing we're going to talk about is answers that are irrelevant. And this sounds really simple, like, oh, of course, if a question is about Nebraska and it starts talking about the Empire State Building, then we know that the Empire State Building answer is wrong. And while it would be nice if all ACT questions were that simple, that's just not the case. An irrelevant answer is one that could be true but isn't supported within the text. And that's being supported within the text is so important to understanding your ACT questions. So don't be fooled. Always answer the question that's being asked. Don't just choose an answer because it is provably true. So the second big one is answers that are actually the opposite of what's being said. And again, this might sound obvious. It seems like it'd be really easy to avoid answers that are saying the opposite. The thing that throws people off here is the fact that a lot of these, if you're just skimming, can sound like really probable answers. So you might see language that sounds like what you're thinking, but the thing that you need to discern to make sure you're getting the right answer is that it's actually in agreement, not just that it sounds like it. The third major way that the ACT will try to trick you is with concept jumbles. Concept jumbles take important information from the text, and it might be partially true, but they mix it together in a way that ultimately contradicts the correct answer. Again, don't be fooled. Like I said, the ACT is really going to go out of its way to try to trick you. Always read the passage for context to make sure that you understand exactly what's happening around the question, not just what's happening in the question itself. The concept jumble answers are counting on the fact that you're not reading thoroughly. So number one tip, read thoroughly. The fourth possible way that a question will try to trick you is through plausible interpretations. So plausible interpretations are particularly hard to spot because they are by nature plausible. What this means is that they represent something that you could interpret from the text, but the word could there is extremely important. You could do it, but what you need is concrete evidence to support whatever answer you choose. If you can't find clear, concrete evidence in the text for an answer, go ahead and cross it out because it's probably just a plausible interpretation and not actually the correct answer. The important thing to remember is that you will always, always, always find textual support on the ACT. So again, ACT questions can be extremely tricky. That's why knowing these ways that they'll try to trick you and then being able to cross out answers that fall into these categories of irrelevancy, of concept jumbles, or a viable interpretation makes it so much easier to choose the correct answer. So the third major tip for acing your ACT is going to be to pre-plan your essay. And I know right off the bat that sounds impossible because how can you know what the prompt is going to be before you've even seen the test? But here's the thing. Over time, it's been demonstrated that despite the fact that the ACT will often change its prompts from year to year, they're always going to fall along the same theme. So planning a few ideas ahead of time can actually save you like 10, 15, 20 minutes when you're writing your essay. If you're the kind of person who sits there and is like, I don't know what to write about, there's all these choices, what the heck am I going to do? You can save a whole bunch of time by having like 4 or 5 topics right in your brain before you even start the test. Here's what's important to know. No matter how the question is framed, it generally will come back to one core theme, which is how has humanity changed the world? The question may also ask you how you feel about that change, but because that's based on your own feeling, and if you take a little time to think about it beforehand, you're not going to have any trouble answering that. So before you even take the test, even before you've even scheduled the test, go ahead and take a minute to think about how you might answer that question if it was presented to you. You can also choose concrete examples to relate this question to in your life. Maybe you're an artist and you want to think about how art changes the world, or you're a scientist and you want to think about how science has changed the world. These are all things that you can think about ahead of time and then fold them into your ultimate essay to make it even stronger, especially if you have research to back it up. Speaking of research, it's also important to know that while you will be graded on your essay, you're probably not going to be fact-checked. You can actually go ahead and just make stuff up. Obviously, it should be within the realms of reality. You shouldn't be saying, humanity has changed the world because we caused unicorns to go extinct. That's kind of silly. But if it comes to like, oh, I know that carbon emissions have increased by a certain percentage, but I can't remember what exactly it is, obviously you're not going to be able to look it up, so you just make it up. The grader isn't going to fact check it, and ultimately it's not really about whether you can memorize facts and statistics, but rather whether you can write a good essay. Obviously, like I said, you're going to want to keep things close to reality, primarily so that your answer doesn't sound flippant. You don't want your grader reading your essay and thinking, this person didn't take this seriously at all. So the fourth big tip for acing your ACT is going to be to use your time wisely. And again, this is going to sound obvious. This is going to be like, well, of course, I'm not going to spend some time doodling on the paper or staring off into space. This is a big important test. Why would I do that? But there are actually ways to minimize the amount of time that you're spending on things that don't actually matter. So one of the big ways that you can do this is to actually not bubble any of your answers until the end of the test. Instead, as you're going through and answering questions, just circle the answer. And then at the end of the test, obviously, leave yourself some time, 3 to 5 minutes usually will be enough. You go back through, look at the answers you've circled, and transfer those to your answer sheet. The second thing you can do is to skip hard questions. Remember, you only have a minute at most to answer each question. If you don't know what the correct answer is, just skip it. Don't waste your precious time on questions that you don't know the answer to and that you're not going to be able to figure out within 30 seconds or so. It ultimately will save you a lot of time and make it a lot easier on you if you are able to just let the questions that you don't know go and return to them later and maybe guess on a couple. There's also just a whole bunch of quick tips you can follow to make the most out of your ACT. So look for conciseness on the reading and English questions. And the reason I say this is because a lot of times it's easy to get fooled by a big, long, complex answer, when most of the time what the ACT actually is looking for is something simple. It's looking for your ability to read. Don't be fooled by really long answers or answers with lots of complicated language in them. They probably aren't the right ones. The second thing, math shouldn't be requiring long, complex formulas. The ACT, though tricky, is going to test your knowledge, and it's not going to be asking you to spend lots and lots of time solving formulas, especially because you only have, again, 36 seconds to 1 minute to answer the question. If you find yourself whipping out formulas you've only used once or twice, you probably don't need them. Down in the description, you can find a link to our blog post all about 31 different formulas that you'll need to know on the ACT. Not all of them may come up, but it's going to be better to know them than to not know them. When it comes to the reading section, you're going to want to actually skim the passage first, then read the question in depth, then go back and find the part that the question is referring to and read that in depth. Don't waste your time reading the whole thing in depth and then reading all the questions in depth, because all you're going to do is forget things. You're going to be spending way too much time. Just make sure that you get the gist of stuff so that when you look at the question, you can find the part that you're looking for if they don't identify specific lines in the question itself. In the science section, you're going to want to focus on core concepts. You're not going to need to know a whole lot of big scientific vocabulary. You're not going to need a whole lot of really theoretical knowledge. Generally, what the science section is looking for is actually your ability to reason through a question, rather than that you know physics or chemistry or nuclear physics or whatever. All they want to know is that you can reason your way through a problem. Also in the science section, and in the math section for that matter, pay attention to diagrams. Diagrams are where you're going to find most of the information that you need, and paying attention to them is going to save you some time in referring back to the question, which may be extra dense or which maybe is harder to scan. Diagrams are your best friend. So, now that you've had a quick guide to how to get a better score in the ACT, take some time to really read through different guides and understand exactly how you can maximize your ACT score. Down in the description box below, we have a whole bunch of links to PrepScholar articles that can help you maximize your score by understanding exactly how the ACT functions. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know your favorite study tips down in the comments below. I can't wait to hear from you guys. Have a great day and happy prepping!